Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at one of the most dramatic and dangerous moments Iran has faced in decades as Tehran burns, protests spread to the country's main ports and oil refineries, and reports emerge claiming that IRGC forces are being overwhelmed on multiple fronts. What began as localized unrest has now evolved into a nationwide confrontation that is shaking the foundations of the Islamic Republic and sending shockwaves far beyond Iran's borders. The streets of Tehran have become the central symbol of this uprising. Videos and eyewitness accounts describe massive fires, clashes, and scenes of chaos that are unlike anything seen in recent years. Protesters have not only returned to the streets despite heavy repression, but they appear more organized, more determined, and more fearless. The flames in Tehran are not just physical fires. They represent anger that has been building for years under economic pressure, political repression, and social restrictions. What makes this moment especially significant is the expansion of protests beyond city centers and universities. Demonstrations are now reported in Iran's main ports and oil refineries, which are the economic lifelines of the country. Ports are crucial for trade, imports, and exports, while refineries are the backbone of Iran's energy sector and state revenue. When unrest reaches these strategic locations, it sends a clear message that this movement is no longer symbolic. It is targeting the heart of the system. For decades, the Iranian government has relied heavily on oil and gas income to survive sanctions and fund its security apparatus. Any disruption in ports or refineries directly threatens the regime's ability to pay salaries, maintain control, and project power both domestically and regionally. Protesters seem to understand this reality very well, which is why the focus on these locations marks a turning point in the struggle. Reports coming from inside Iran suggest that IRGC forces, long considered the most loyal and powerful pillar of the regime, are facing serious challenges. In several areas, protesters have reportedly pushed back security units, forced retreats, or overwhelmed checkpoints. While the government continues to deny any defeat, the scale and intensity of the clashes suggest that the IRGC is under unprecedented pressure. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was designed to protect the system at all costs. It has vast resources, intelligence networks, and paramilitary forces. For years, its presence alone was enough to intimidate and suppress dissent. However, the current wave of protests appears different. Protesters are no longer dispersing easily. They are returning again and again, even after arrests, injuries, and fatalities. One key factor behind this resilience is the deep economic crisis facing Iran. Inflation, unemployment, currency collapse, and widespread poverty have affected nearly every family. Many Iranians feel they have nothing left to lose. When survival itself is at stake, fear becomes less effective as a tool of control. This economic desperation is fueling the scale and persistence of the unrest. Another important factor is the generational shift within Iranian society. A large portion of the protesters are young people who have grown up under sanctions, isolation, and strict social controls. They are digitally connected, aware of life outside Iran, and deeply frustrated by the lack of opportunity at home. For them, reform within the existing system feels impossible, and confrontation seems like the only remaining option. The spread of protests to ports and refineries also suggests involvement from workers, not just students or activists. Labor participation has historically been one of the most dangerous threats to the Iranian state. When workers strike or sabotage operations, the economic impact is immediate and severe. If these reports are accurate and sustained, the regime could face a financial crisis on top of its political one. Tehran's fires have also taken on a psychological dimension. The capital city is the seat of power, the symbol of authority, and the showcase the regime tries to protect at all costs. Images of burning streets, damaged buildings, and running battles in Tehran undermine the image of control that the government projects to its own people and to the world. Once that image cracks, restoring it becomes extremely difficult. The government's response so far has followed a familiar pattern. Officials accuse foreign powers of orchestrating the unrest, blame external media, and promise harsh punishment for those involved. Internet restrictions, arrests, and show-off, forced deployments have been reported. Yet, despite these measures, the protests continue to spread, suggesting that repression alone may no longer be sufficient. Internationally, these events are being watched very closely. Iran plays a critical role in regional politics, energy markets, and global security dynamics. Any sign of instability, especially involving oil infrastructure, raises concerns about supply disruptions and wider economic consequences. Governments and analysts are trying to assess whether this unrest is a temporary flare-up or the beginning of a deeper transformation. Another crucial aspect of this situation is morale within the security forces themselves. Sustained protests put enormous strain on police, basage, and ERG units. Long deployments, constant confrontation with civilians, and unclear political outcomes can lead to exhaustion and internal doubts. History shows that when security forces begin to hesitate or fracture, the balance of power can shift rapidly. There are also increasing reports of symbolic acts of defiance. Protesters tearing down posters, setting fire to regime symbols, and openly chanting against top leadership figures indicate a loss of fear that is rare in Iran's tightly controlled environment. Such actions, once unthinkable, are now being carried out in broad daylight in some areas. The involvement of strategic locations like ports suggests coordination that goes beyond spontaneous street protests. Organizing actions in heavily guarded economic zones requires planning, communication, and local support. This raises questions about how deeply dissatisfaction has penetrated different layers of society, including workers, technicians, and possibly even lower-level officials. At the same time, it is important to approach claims of ERG defeat with caution. The ERG remains a powerful and well-armed force. The state still controls heavy weaponry, surveillance systems, and prisons. A complete collapse of its authority is unlikely to happen overnight. However, even limited defeats or withdrawals are symbolically powerful and can inspire further resistance. The current moment feels like a test of endurance for both sides. Protesters are testing whether sustained pressure can force change, while the regime is testing whether repression and time can wear down resistance. Each day that protests continue, especially in strategic areas, shifts the psychological balance slightly against the authorities. Tehran in Flames is also resonating deeply with Iranians abroad. The diaspora is amplifying images, organizing protests, and lobbying foreign governments to take stronger stances. This international attention adds another layer of pressure on Tehran, even if it does not immediately translate into concrete action. One cannot ignore the role of social media and citizen journalism in this crisis. Despite internet shutdowns and censorship, information continues to leak out. Short videos, photos, and voice messages are shaping global perceptions and undermining official narratives. In many ways, the battle over Iran's future is also a battle over information. The question now is where this leads. Will the protests escalate further, spreading to more refineries, ports, and industrial centers? Will strikes intensify and choke the economy, or will the state manage to regain control through force, arrests, and concessions? At this stage, all outcomes remain possible. What is clear is that something fundamental has changed. The scale, geography, and targets of the protests indicate a level of confrontation that goes beyond previous waves of unrest. Tehran burning while ports and refineries are challenged sends a powerful signal that the conflict has entered a new phase. For ordinary Iranians, this is a moment of both hope and fear. Hope that real change might finally be possible, and fear of the violence and uncertainty that such change often brings. The cost has already been high, and it may rise further before any resolution is reached. As events continue to unfold, the world will be watching closely. Iran stands at a crossroads, facing internal pressure unlike anything in recent memory. Whether this moment leads to reform, repression, or a deeper crisis will depend on decisions made in the coming days and weeks by both protesters and those in power. This situation is still developing, and information remains fluid and contested. What cannot be denied is the intensity of the moment. Tehran in flames, protests at ports and refineries, and reports of ERG forces under strain together paint a picture of a country in profound turmoil. We will continue to follow this story closely and bring you updates as more verified information emerges. Stay informed, stay critical, and keep watching, because the outcome of this crisis will not only shape Iran's future, but could also have far-reaching consequences for the entire region and beyond.